Hello and welcome everybody to the Half Court Press podcast. We're here in mid-June. I think we're like 100 days from basketball practice or something like that. Sam McKewon with Joel Lorenzi.
Okay. Well,
right?
Probably. I'm not. Who's counting the days, right? But at least to the season is 100 days from change.
Joel is an NBA front office season, right? Like this is free agent season.
Well, it's draft day.
Oh, it's draft. Sure. Yeah. It's draft day for one guy. Right? This is a one-guy show. This will be the most watched NBA draft they've had since
Zion
or LeBron?
Zion, yeah. I almost went the step and said LeBron, but I think Zion. There's probably a little bit of predictability in the fact that people know Wemby's going first. I don't know if they ever stopped anybody before between the Zion draft and the LeBron draft, but I don't know. I don't think. I mean, I don't even know what the ratings were back then for the Bron draft. So I can't even lie really and say.
Many. The Sports Media Watch will have it out, I'm sure, Friday morning. But I think LeBron is the most watched NBA draft of all time, and then I think Shaq might be like 2, because when he came out, it was a pretty big deal. And as a kid, I watched it every single year, and I remember the ones I remember were Shaq, Allen Iverson. That was a big deal when he came out. Tim Duncan was a big deal because we all grew up watching Tim Duncan for like 4 years because he was in college that long. And then LeBron.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who Kobe Bryant was when he was picked. He was 14th, 15th pick. 13th. Barely knew anybody knew. Like, oh yeah, he's good, but he's not going to go in the whatever. So anyway, so big night there. That'll be cool. Best player since whenever. The Yao Ming one was a big deal too because he was a curiosity. Yeah. This kid's way better than Yao Ming.
And for what it's worth, I watch every year anyway. But the drafts I've had the pleasure of remembering are like the one that always is engraved in my head is like the Victor Oladipo, Cody Zeller draft. I don't know what year. What was that, like 2013, right?
Yeah, so they went to the Sweet 16 and then they got eliminated by Syracuse. Yeah, I would say that was right. They were supposed to win the national championship, and they lost to Jim Boeheim.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Syracuse
draft,
went to the Final Four. Was he? That's right. That's good. Okay, so you know who's not in the draft? Creighton.
Yeah.
Their guys all came back. Either they came back or one went to K-State and one went to Gonzaga.
Including the guys that left. Yep.
Yeah,
all in college.
Creighton's not in the draft tonight. You don't have to do any draft coverage. I'm guessing you're kind of happy about that because it would have been about 10:07 when Ryan Kalkbrenner was taken,
Well, I would have been fine.
So anyway, they're back. So what we're going to be talking about, there's how many Big East players are going in the first round? A couple?
We got Jordan Hawkins. I guess Old Max is probably in contention for late first. Cam Whitmore.
Yeah, he's good.
I'm blanking on anybody else. I'm not sure there is anybody else. I'm probably missing somebody huge. But those are the 3 that come to mind because Cam is top 10 and like Jordan Hawkins is like top 20. So
Whitmore's going to be a good player in the NBA. It's too bad. I mean, it isn't too bad. Good for him that he's going to make the money. It's too bad he didn't stay around for another year because I think he would have been really special next year and it would have been fun to watch him one more time. Okay, what we're talking about is this is sort of the mid-season roster reset. Off-season roster reset for the Big East. We'll do one of these for the Big Ten next week with Nebraska. It won't be nearly as well informed as Joel's about to be with the Big East, but we will. We're gonna look at kind of resetting things. The league has the defending national champions in Connecticut. It had a team that made the Elite Eight in Creighton, and then it had a team in Marquette that they lost in the second round, but they were one of the top 6 or 7 teams in the country. When they went into the NCAA tournament, they won the conference regular season and then won the conference tournament, right? Right? They did, yeah. Yep. They won them both. So they had the rare double, picked the wrong time to play Tom Izzo in the second round, but they were a great team last year, and so we're going to talk about those 3 for sure. Then we're going to talk about some of the other teams in the league. Obviously, Villanova looks like they're going to be Villanova again, and so certainly that's going to be a conversation. And then we have new coaches at 3 schools, right? 3. Ed Cooley at Georgetown. Mm-hmm. Rick Pitino at St. John's. Man, that's sweet. And then
Kimmy
Kimmy
English.
English at Providence, replacing Cooley, who went to Georgetown. Okay, let's get going. Obviously, we've talked ad nauseum about Creighton, and we know kind of where they're at. We know what they've added and what they lost and what they retained. The two teams that immediately come to the top of my mind, Joel, when I think about contenders are Connecticut and Marquette. Connecticut won the national championship from the 4 seed. Then they were the number 4 team in the Big East. They were the 4 seed in the Big East tournament. Mm-hmm. They won the national championship from there. That gives you a sense of how deep the league is. They lost to Damasinogo. You can help me now with who else they lost, who they gained.
Andre Jackson, they lost to the
Hawkins.
draft, and Hawkins, yeah.
So UConn is the defending national champions. Would you pick them to do that again based on what they have?
I was thinking about this yesterday. No shade to them. I actually really like their starting lineup and the combination of, experience, guard play, young guys, a mix of talented young guys. Like, I like the combination they bring with their starting lineup. But I thought the run they had was already improbable. Like, obviously, the way they did it in the tournament was dominant, man. They dominated the entire way. But I don't think anybody really saw, not only, like, I don't think their championship odds were so outlandish, but I think the way they did it was unforeseen, probably by anybody. So if I had to bet, I'd imagine it would be tougher this time around without 3 guys that could maybe go to the draft and, a lottery pick and Hawkins. And I would probably bet on the field. I think it's just a betting on the field thing instead of them. It's not that I don't think they're capable. Obviously, they got a proven staff and a good combination of guys, like I said, but I'd probably have to take the field, especially with some of the top teams out there right now.
What are the big returners? They're going to have players really step up. Obviously, Klingon is one of those players.
Yep.
He had a good tournament, but who are the other guys that are going to now have to move into a role where they become the players who carry UConn's team?
And Klingon, for what it's worth, is the player, right? Like, this is the dude that probably could have went top 40, top 35 just off potential, should he had stayed in the draft. But between next year certainly being a weaker pool of talent, and he'll have another year under his belt, and not just per 36, per 40 projections that people were doing with him. He'll be in better standing next year. So that's the guy, right? Like, this is going to be one of the better bigs in college basketball. I'm sure if his per 36s, whatever metrics we do, whatever they do, project to a larger minute load. But then you got Tristan Newton, who comes back and had a pretty good tournament, some good tournament games, I'll say. Stephon Castle, one of the better recruits in the country. Cam Spencer, who was a big deal between Rutgers and whatnot. And Alex Caravan, who
Caravan's good.
Yeah, he's a great player for them last year. Expected to make another jump this year. And if he's playing some 4 for them next to Cam Spencer, it's just the spacing next to Klingon seems pretty good. I mean, I could see why this would be people's pick for winning the league, or at least being the best team to start the season in the league. And then you got Samson Johnson off the bench, Hassan Diarra, who gave good spot minutes at guard. Like, they're fine. It's not I don't think it's the best bench in the league, but I think their starting lineup is so good and has that balance that it'll be a lot of people's pick to win the league.
Cam Spencer's a good player. Watched him a lot. Tough. Was overshadowed at Rutgers from all the other players who were there last year, and then he was overshadowed by Paul Mulcahy this most recent year, even though he had way better stance than Paul. Paul was always sort of viewed as like a, whatever, the Marcus Smart of the Big Ten. And we'll see where he lands. But Cam Spencer was definitely one of the best players in the league. Okay, so Marquette, going into the NCAA tournament, I picked Marquette for the Final Four. Really impressed by them. They didn't make it. They lost in the second round. That's the NCAA tournament for you. And they probably ran into one of the few teams that could do that from the 7th seed in Michigan State. But won the regular season, won the conference tournament. How many times they beat UConn? 2 or 3?
I can't.
They beat them in the
remember,
tournament.
but, yeah.
I know they beat them in the tournament. I think they beat them one other time.
Yeah.
during the season. So that was probably the team.
Yeah, twice, I think.
That if UConn had faced them, it would have been a hell of a battle. They lost maybe their most interesting player. They didn't lose their best player. They got a lot back.
Fair, but I do think Oso's a big hit, or not Oso, Omax. Omax is a big hit, man. Like, bigger than I think people realize. But I think where they're in better standing than a lot of the teams we're going to talk about, especially the teams at the top, is that they still probably have, off the top of my head, one of the better benches in terms of continuity and people they trust between Sean Jones and Ben Gold, who gave them some stretch big minutes, and Chase Ross. Like, they'll have one of the more comfortable benches. And then on top of already having the continuity they always wanted in the starting lineup, Tyler Kolek, who to some people
Player of the year.
To some people was first team All-American. Stevie Mitchell, who's as big a pest in the league as anybody, especially for a guard. Cam Jones, who was one of the better creators. I mean, those two dudes as a duo in pick and roll were nuts.
Just shot 278 threes.
Who, Cam Jones?
Yeah,
it sounds about right. And he made so many. Like, as a creator, like, he's one of the best shot creators in the league. I thought him and Trey Alexander, from a award voting standpoint, were in similar standing. Like, I remember when I did I don't remember if I put him on my second team All Big East, but I think I was deciding between those two.
Did you pick Trey?
I did pick Trey.
Better free throw shooter.
I did pick Trey. But David Joplin, speaking of shooters, Oso Ighodaro, like they're gonna have, I think you could really pick either of these teams. They're like probably a hair from each other in terms of talent. Really, I think it just probably comes down to coaching and a bench, to be honest. Because I mean, there were few pick and rolls I watched last year that I was actually interested in, like I was with Kolek / Cam Jones paired with Oso. Like, that was one of the best pick and rolls, if not, I'd say the best in the league, probably. Like, just watching them play, the way they put you on the empty side, like, it was tough to watch other teams try to defend that. I mean, I know Creighton had some trouble with that when Marquette pressed them and stole that game here. So Marquette is going to still be good. And if you honestly ask me to pick between the two, I have a tough time because I honestly forgot about Cam Jones. Like, I was thinking, like, Omax is a big hit, but Joplin is a shooter you could put there, and they're still pretty formidable, man. I mean, I don't know.
The one player that I remember you talking about after the first Marquette matchup was Ighodaro, because and Kalkbrenner was just coming back, or was he even in that game? I can't remember. I don't think he played.
Kalkbrenner, in the first time they played, no,
he didn't play that game. But no. Ighodaro he really took Fred King to school. He took a lot of guys.
Yeah, I mean, because to go in and I don't know how even if this is even like I'm not gonna say whether it's a solid game plan, but if it's even really plausible, but as the passing playmaking big that Oso is, people want to take that away and maybe force him to score, but
three assists a game I think he averaged. It's pretty good.
And that doesn't even account for all the times they run offense through him, the post or whatever, DHOs, but they tried to force him to score in that game, which I'm sure teams will do. I mean, here and there, because you want to take away their playmaking, him as a playmaking hub, and he actually, he tore Fred King to shreds. I mean, for what it's worth, Fred King was obviously a true freshman and hasn't been playing basketball long, but there are teams that have tried to force him to score, and it doesn't work out because he has good touch over the top, and he has good feel in general.
Let's move to Villanova. So, again, we already know about Creighton, so we're not talking a lot about Villanova.
And
we're talking a lot about
Creighton would be somewhere sandwiched in there. I think they're still a top 10 team probably, depending on how you view what they brought back and what they brought in. Again, it comes down to the bench. Depending on how you view what they brought in and how – because I'm hearing great things about Trout. For what it's worth, I heard somebody call him the truth. I heard some of his shooting numbers to this point in their summer sessions, and they're ungodly numbers, like the crazy numbers. I don't know if that'll hold up in full 5-on-5s and of course translate to the season. But for what it's worth, what he offers as a 6'10" shooting big, it sounds like they'll be fine. But I do worry about. I've written about this. I do worry about their rim pressure and all that, and so there are concerns, but not enough to push them out of the range of these teams we talked about. So they'll be sandwiched somewhere in between.
Yeah, Trout. The one thing you can say about Isaac, and this isn't because of any evaluation I have, is he was the scorer for his team, so he had to score every which way. And so one thing you learn when you play for that team versus playing Jason Green, for example. Jason Green is a very good basketball player. Until he was a senior in high school, Jason Green did not have to score more than 10 points a game. He just didn't. They had 5 scorers. Isaac Trout, from the minute he walked on the court at Grand Island Senior High, had to score 20 a game. And there's an advantage in that. Like, you learn how to do it. And so I think he has. But if you were doing this right at this moment, Joel, Marquette, quick answer. Marquette, Connecticut, Creighton. Who is the team that you're picking to win the Big East? And who is the team that you're ranking the highest in a poll? Those aren't necessarily the same. Who's the better NCAA tournament team?
Probably UConn out of the bunch. But it's between UConn and Creighton.
Based on what we saw.
Shaka has shown me enough to where I just don't know about a tournament run.
Yep.
And if we do the evidence, this isn't recency bias because it's not like these are playoff series we're talking about, right? We're not talking about 5 games, 6 game, 7 game series.
Right.
We're talking about 1 game result, and Creighton was just in the Elite 8.
Yep.
They as a staff, they've proven they can get there. They added a former head coach to their staff. We're not talking about a lack of minds here. And then UConn is the same thing. They're a proven staff with some continuity and some guys that'll take leaps. But in terms of win the league, I think with the pieces that UConn has added, I'm sure there'll be a slump there somewhere in Big East play compared to Marquette, where I think Marquette will probably struggle less between the amount of continuity they have, and I don't know. It feels like we could see a repeat of last year. I don't think UConn will lose 5 out of 6 or whatever it was they lost in Big East play, but I can see them losing a couple more games than Marquette, just off Marquette, how good they are in the regular season and just how much they brought back. I mean, there aren't a ton of new faces, and they brought almost everybody who was important back besides Omax.
I think we're in agreement that whatever we watched of Villanova last year based on what they had and what we saw of maybe Kyle Neptune's pressers, we like him.
Yeah.
Is Villanova back?
Yeah.
Are they back now with the transfers that they got?
They are stupidly back.
Okay.
I think with their lineup, because they got a really fun lineup, like between TJ Bamba, who was a top scorer in the Pac-12, and Hakeem Hart, who was a good Maryland starter, and Tyler Burton. I mean, Tyler Burton, I'm not sure how much this is going to be covered throughout this whole thing, throughout this process, as we keep, fluctuating between UConn and Marquette and Creighton. But Tyler Burton might be the most slept-on pickup of the whole offseason.
Where did he come from again?
Richmond. That's
right.
So this is a big wing we talking about. Like a dude that could play 3-4 for them based on however they want to play. Probably 4 if you want to start all of Justin Moore, T.J. Bamba, and Hakeem Hart. But Tyler Burton, I mean, when you pull up the tape, like some of the stuff he's doing, like, is crazy at his size, especially at this level. Like, there are going to be few answers for him at this level. Like, it's going to take some real athletic forwards in front of him. And don't get me wrong, the Big East has him. But his creativity as a scorer, like, his size, the fluidity, like, he's nice, man. I really like his game. And their lineup, period. Like, Eric Dixon was already giving people problems. Justin Moore was already giving people problems. You add all that scoring to where it's not just Justin Moore and Eric Dixon pick and pop, or Justin Moore having to struggle to create, or whatever, Eric Dixon post-ups. Like, there's some real guard play here,
yeah,
and some real creation, I think, here. And they don't have the best bench of this group. I thought Lance Ware was a good pickup, the guy that's been playing behind Sheway for years, and they still got Longino and maybe a couple other guys, Archie Diacono, I think, but like, it's not the best bench. But I think their starting lineup is good enough to where they can creep, I think, at some point in the season into that top 10 in the country, even if briefly, and they're gonna make problems once league play comes around. Like,
they how would I put this? Are they going to continue to play at the pace that they've been playing at, or are they going to speed it up? Because last year they were playing like a Big East team from 1985.
I think some of that was personnel.
Yeah.
I think they got better guards now.
Well, I think they have a smart coach who knew that he couldn't outgun a lot of the teams he was playing, so he had to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know if they'll completely convert here and just be run and gun. I think Neptune has a mind, and the players he has, like Justin Moore, is still a very capable pick and roll guy, as I'd imagine TJ Bamba is, and Tyler Burton might even be, manning some of those pick and rolls as a ball handler. So this could still very well be a team that thrives in the half court, I think. So I don't know if the slow game is completely out the question. I mean, they still like to dig into teams. They're still going to try to do that. So I imagine they're still going to try to slow teams down.
Tyler Burton averaged 19 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists for Richmond last year.
That's a crazy line. It's a crazy line.
Not a great three-point shooter, but yes. And again, Richmond wasn't great last year, but they're historically a pretty good team. So, and how tall is he? Let's see here.
He's like 6'9".
He's 6. It says he's 6'7". He's probably 6'9". Tyler Burton.
Let's go in the middle and say 6'8".
Okay. I think they're back. I like their coach. I think last year part of what happened was they were a player or two short, and Cam Whitmore, their most talented player, was hurt for how many games? 15, 20? Yeah, he was never 100%, was he?
Not 15 or 20, but like the first, he was injured to start the season, and then when he came back, there was rumors that he was never quite right for the system. The things that are best about his game, Villanova, the way they played, couldn't really bring it out, and he wasn't really the best sport. I don't know. There are things you hear.
Well, he didn't sign on to. He probably didn't sign. He signed on to play for Jay Wright, and he was. I think he honored his commitment, and he's gone now.
Sure.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that happens.
So assuming
Jay Wright committed, didn't Jay Wright retire in like the summer?
The summer, yeah.
Yeah.
And so even still, Cam Whitmore gave you good enough minutes. Obviously, he's enough of a talent to where he's like, okay, he's freshman of the year vibes. But replace that with a guy who, obviously a college basketball veteran for a really solid A-10 team, who's averaging 19 and 7. Like, if that's who you're plugging in for your freshman of the year who left, like, I think you're pretty fine. Plus the guard play they add, plus Lance Ware if he's any good, because I got to imagine you're going to want to spot Dixon, and this is probably the best they're going to be able to do it. Lance Ware is going to have to take a jump, but I imagine having spent so long behind Sheway, like there's something in him. I mean, he's a former top 50 recruit, so I got to imagine there's some type of fire in there. But if these are the guys you're plugging in for what you had last year, and then Mark Armstrong is still there, and so I think they'll be perfectly fine. Not just fine. The pieces that Neptune probably wishes he had are there.
It's gonna be good. Okay, so we're not going to talk about, unless you really want to, Butler, Xavier, DePaul, and Seton Hall. I know you're interested in Seton Hall because you thought their coach would but we don't have to talk about them. The three last teams I want to talk about are St. John's, Georgetown, and Providence. They all have new coaches.
Yep.
Ed Cooley went from Providence to Georgetown. He was replaced by Kim English, who was previously at George Mason, I think. And then St. John's fires Mike Anderson. Probably didn't do that in a way that's going to help them in court. I think they're going to have to pay Mike Anderson more money than they have to this point. So they could hire Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino will now be on, I don't know what. I guess this is only his second Big East team, right? Because he coached at Providence, then Kentucky, then Louisville.
What was Louisville?
They were in the Big East. This is his third Big East team. Because for a little while there, Louisville was in the Big East.
Yeah.
So this will be his third team at St. John's. Of those three teams, who's the best? Who becomes the number 5 team in the league?
Probably St. John's right now. Just off you look at their roster and it's really rounded out. Jordan Dingle was a 23 plus point per game scorer for Penn. They bring back Joel Soriano. Glenn Taylor was
What do you think of him?
Joel Soriano?
Yeah.
I think he's still one of the better bigs in the league, and probably like top 10 in the country off the top of my head, top 10 or 12 big. I mean, I can't imagine too many better than him now, especially like
he made Nebraska look bad, but he did not play. I mean, he had some rebounds against Creighton, but Kalkbrenner really made him look bad.
And for what it's worth, like the guard play last year was questionable. They ran so much through Soriano, and
They did.
I'm not sure he ever really beat the stat pattern allegations, but he was so overwhelmingly their first option. Like it was hard for it to not seem like he was stat padding.
Well, he missed so many shots, he get his own rebound. I mean, he definitely padded his own stats in the rebounding department.
Sure, but
because he would rebound his own misses.
But him at the 5 is like the biggest, almost the biggest get Patino could have got. I mean, to keep him out of all the guys. I mean, for what it's worth, I think Patino really did like some Italian mob thing and just kicked everybody he didn't want to the curb. Like,
sure.
As much as we don't talk about this in college basketball, like it's a thing, and I think Patino, with his age and his probable timeline, was just like, all right, I like don't really got time for but we talking about Jordan Dingle. Glenn Taylor was a really good Pac-12 starter for Oregon State, 12 points per game. You bring in R.J. Lewis, former SEC guy.
I don't know him.
I'm pretty sure Ole Miss before.
Maybe. SEC is the one league I couldn't tell you much about.
Well, that was the one I covered for like 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and he was there then. And then so he gets.
And they signed this Brady Dunlap.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be pretty good.
And he got Simeon Wilcher, who was committed to North Carolina, and Naheem Allen, who was with UConn last year. So the things have rounded out there for Patino when it looked bleak once upon a time, once it was just Iona guys, you know what I'm saying? Like now there's a real squad over there. And obviously I think even before Simeon Wilcher and maybe another guy, like people were maybe having him in the top 30 range just off it being Patino and who he is and what he's done at Iona and elsewhere. Like I think it was kind of just like a thing like don't bet against Patino, and now he actually has a squad. So I think they'll be in that top 30 in the country range, and they should really piss some people off come conference play.
They probably will, because I think Rick Pitino pisses people off.
Yeah.
Everybody's rooting for Ed Cooley. I think basketball is better when Georgetown's good. When I was a kid, I think Georgetown won a national championship when I was 6.5 years old, and I remember it. And then I remember just watching Georgetown basically my whole life. And so, like, there's a lot of people who are under 50 who remember Georgetown, that Georgetown. They remember Patrick Ewing and Mutombo and Alonzo Mourning and Allen Iverson. Basketball's better when Georgetown's good. Is he going to make Georgetown good again?
I think so. I mean, I think the pieces are already moving. He got some of his guys from Providence to go over there. They're already more talented than I think they were a year ago. And so I think people really believe in Ed. Like, as much as, and I don't see a lot of Georgetown Twitter on my timeline, but I see a lot of Providence Twitter on my timeline. And I think a lot of the fuel for people being as pissed as they were, obviously, if you're a diehard fan, there's some level of like a sense of betrayal there. But I think people wouldn't have cared if he sucked as a coach. People cared because of what he built there, and he has the resources to build something similar at Georgetown, if not better, and rebuild what it once was. So I think they'll be fine. I think they'll finish top 7 in the league, which is good considering what this league looks like again this year. And moving forward, I'm sure he'll get the talent with what Georgetown the brand is, and they'll be fine.
He, I think his reputation is he can outcoach a lot of people, and he'll outwork people. And I think you're right when you say if he does what at Georgetown what he did at Providence, the difference will be that at Georgetown he can get a little bit better player than he did at Providence. I think it's probably hard to recruit to Providence a little bit. First of all, it's in Rhode Island. Second of all, I don't think the weather's that great up there after November?
Well, if you really want to play in the Big East, that's probably most Big East programs anyway.
It is, but like Washington D.C. is in Washington D.C., Providence.
Well, it snows in D.C., right?
It does, but man, Washington D.C. is wouldn't you rather play there if you could?
There are other circumstances that go into it, like where they play and how big a deal you are in the town and whatnot, which I'm sure people consider fit, of course. But yeah, I'd rather live in DC for sure, no question. You got to ask me that.
Georgetown's at. Okay, Providence is the last team I want to talk about. Kim English. So you have some insight here that I'm curious on your end. You covered Quanzo Martin in Missouri.
I did.
That he gets fired.
Yeah.
They didn't hire Kim English. They hired what I think to be a better coach.
Oh yeah, a great hire.
They hired a better coach, but they could have hired Kim English and they didn't do it. Why didn't they do that?
Yeah, and I made a mistake. I made a mistake a few minutes ago. I said Artie Lewis was in the SEC. He was at UMass. Luis Rodriguez was who I think I was thinking of at Ole Miss. But did they make a mistake? No, I don't think they did. I think Dennis was on that trajectory. I think Kim English, as much as Mizzou fans would have loved that because he's a true son, like Mizzou fans say, and was part of some of the best Mizzou basketball programs ever seen. Like, I think based on where he is now, like probably would have took some growing into in that role. Whereas Dennis, I think, could have made an immediate impact, which we saw last year, not just coaching wise and staff wise, but personnel and recruiting wise. And I think you're seeing that now. One, Dennis made the most of bringing guys over from Cleveland State, mid-major transfers, not the craziest pool of talent. What was supposed to be a star player from Mo State and Isaiah Mosley, or at least one of his star players, had this weird thing going on all year, which I don't think they ever even got to the bottom of that. Hardly played. So he had his fair share of, maybe not obstacles, but limitations, and still made the most out of that year. And now they're bringing guys from like Montverde and different recruits.
Oh, he's going to be a really good coach there.
Yeah.
No question about it. English is young.
Yeah.
Like that, I think that's the biggest thing. I covered Kim English's last NCAA tournament game at Missouri 10 years ago when they lost to Norfolk State.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember him on the court. So he's young. Like, if I covered him when he was playing basketball, he's young.
Yeah. And thank God this isn't a Mizzou podcast, because the mention of that game alone is like sends people into straitjackets.
I know. I remember it produced one of the better stories I've ever written.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about Missouri. But at Providence, you need somebody who's kind of a promoter. I don't. It's probably an interesting fit, but this is a risk for him.
Yeah.
Like it's a professional risk. If it goes really well, he can go anywhere.
Yeah, I think it was better. Kim English made more sense at Providence than he did at Mizzou, as crazy as it is to say. I think where Mizzou needed to be, because you're looking at, even though Quanzo had a couple tournament appearances, Quanzo probably made the most out of that Drew Smith, Jeremiah Tillman, whatever team, because they were like top 10 in the country at one point. I don't know how, but the entire era of Quanzo Martin as a whole, him, the eras before him, the couple of eras before him, like Mizzou basketball had been bad for at least, like maybe not at least, like 10 years, like eight or 10 years, and they needed somebody to come in and change the footing, and I'm not sure Kim English would have did that right away. Like, they needed a now move, and Kim English, I don't know that he has to make Providence what it was next year, but I think it's lower pressure in that setting.
Yes.
It's a lower pressure setting, and I think as a younger guy, it helped in retaining a lot of that core that you needed. Bryce Hopkins, Devin Carter. I mean, you saw the IG lives and all the stuff, how creative he got to bring in guys and keep guys. So
he brought 3 guys from George Mason
and brought his guys with him. And so the young thing, I think, really works for him. He's charismatic, really clever personality. I thought he was always one of the smarter players that Mizzou media probably ever had the chance to cover, even though that was before my time. So I think just as a general personality, he'll be good for the league and was good for where Providence was left off, where Eric Cooley left them stranded.
Josh Aduro averaged 15.6 points, 7.9 rebounds, and 2.6 assists for George Mason last year. So he's probably, they were 20 and 13. I don't think they made the NCAA tournament. Or did they? Did they qualify for it based on winning the
Providence did, or George Mason?
George Mason did not.
No,
they
didn't.
They lost to St. Louis in the A-10
Yeah, it's
conference.
A-10, yeah.
But they won some games last year. They weren't terrible. They were 20-13.
Yeah.
So they brought over Aduro. He becomes effectively one of their best players.
Yeah.
Providence always kind of had a blue collar style, really tough. The team that always gave Creighton problems, in part because they could usually elbow Creighton out of a game physically. Now they had that really fun game up in
Providence, the double OT.
that was a great game.
Yeah, great game.
But even at the end, both teams are exhausted, and Providence is the one kind of standing at the end.
Yeah.
So
And I
they had a physical identity.
I think the biggest job for Kim, because I'm not sure this is a win the league now move, is to grow into this role as you grow with your players. The biggest job for him was to keep Bryce Hopkins and Devin Carter, the guys that won them games last year. Bryce Hopkins, who's as good of a first option as
He's
anybody in the league.
Yeah.
That was the job, and then you bring your guys over. You keep Jaden Pierre, you bring Corey Floyd over from UConn. Like, you make the moves that are gonna keep you around, keep you, circling teams and still knocking on the door, especially as a first year young coach for a program that probably took a bet on you, even though your name was tossed around here and there. Like, they took a bet on you, replacing Ed Cooley.
Do you want to talk about Xavier? We could talk about them maybe another time. They obviously had a lot to replace.
Yeah.
That's the team that reset button.
Yeah, but Fremantle is still there, which was a big deal for them. Probably changed the trajectory of their season with his injury.
Paul Mulcahy may go there. He is a. Now, I'm telling you, that guy will be a way better statistically. He'll go up having left Rutgers. Rutgers, and you know this, I'm sure you watch enough Rutgers games. Rutgers literally walks the ball up the floor. And, who was a kid they had for 5 years? It was like a 265-pound guard. I can't remember his name. He was the son of Ron Harper's son.
Oh, yeah, Ron Harper Jr.
He's huge. And he's just so Mulcahy will be a better player outside of that team. That guy's a hard-working coach, and God bless him. But Fred Hoiberg's got a winning record against Nebraska because Rutgers can't score. And so Mulcahy will be, if they get him, now they may not. He's looking West Coast. But anyway, Xavier's got a lot to replace. DePaul probably finished last in the league again. Okay, that's all the time we have for this podcast. We'll be back next week to talk about Nebraska in the Big Ten. Spoiler alert, they're not going to be among the top 3 teams, but where will they end up? We'll talk about it next week. For Joel, I'm Sam. Thanks for listening.